Regular and line infantry. Meet the Tommy, the heartbeat of the British Empire. While headlines often chased the glory of Spitfires or roaring tanks, the war was ultimately won or lost by the mud-stained boots of the regular and line infantry. This wasn't merely a mass of men, it was a sophisticated web of 49 divisions, anchored by a 300-year-old regimental system, where a soldier fought less for a distant map and more for the local honor of his county. Armed with the legendary Lee Enfield number 4, these men possessed a rhythmic lethality. Despite the rise of automatic weapons, a trained British rifleman could still execute the Mad Minute, delivering 15 to 30 aimed shots in 60 seconds, a rate of fire so blistering that enemy scouts often mistakenly reported facing heavy machine gun nests. However, the real secret to their endurance lay in the section. Every 10-man group was tactically built entirely around one single weapon, the Bren light machine gun. It was a symbiotic dance where 9 men lived and died to keep that one gun barking. By 1944, these battalions had become so finely tuned that they could transition from a grueling 20-mile march under 60 pounds of gear to a full-scale assault in mere minutes. They were the enduring anvil upon which the Axis powers were eventually crushed. From the dunes of El Alamein to the suffocating hedgerows of Normandy, the line infantry remained the only force capable of doing the one thing no tank ever could, standing on a piece of ground and refusing to leave. The Home Guard. If the line infantry was the anvil abroad, the Home Guard was the shield at the doorstep. Born in the dark summer of 1940 under the looming shadow of Operation Sea Lion, the planned Nazi invasion, this force was initially dismissed by some as a dad's army. Yet, the reality was far more visceral. When Anthony Eden made a radio appeal for volunteers, the government expected 150,000 men. Instead, a staggering 250,000 signed up within the first 24 hours. By its peak, 1.5 million citizens stood ready. In those desperate early days, the British War Office was so stripped of gear after Dunkirk that it issued 250,000 pikes, literally steel pipes with bayonets welded on, to men who lacked rifles. It was a scene from the Middle Ages playing out in the 20th century. But don't let the broomsticks fool you. Hidden within the Home Guard were the auxiliary units, ultra-secret stay-behind squads. These men were trained in silent killing and sabotage, stationed in underground bunkers with a grim life expectancy of just 12 days should the Germans land. Their mission was not to win, but to bleed the invaders white from the shadows. By 1943, the Home Guard had evolved into a formidable, well-armed paramilitary force, operating anti-aircraft batteries and coastal defenses, effectively freeing up entire regular divisions for the invasion of Europe. They were the ultimate psychological deterrent, an entire nation that had turned its backyards into fortresses and its grandfathers into partisans. They proved that while an army can be defeated, a mobilized population is impossible to govern. Motorized infantry. As the 20th century accelerated, the British Army realized a brutal truth. A tank is a lonely, vulnerable beast without a shadow. Enter the motorized infantry, the mechanical vanguard designed to bridge the gap between the speed of the engine and the grit of the bayonet. While the legendary German panzers often grabbed the headlines, the British response relied on a humble, open-topped steel box, the universal carrier. Often overlooked, this vehicle holds the staggering record as the most manufactured armored fighting vehicle in human history, with over 113,000 units produced, surpassing even the iconic Tu-34 Sherman tanks. These men were the tactical skin of the armored divisions. In the dust-choked expanses of North Africa, units like the 7th Armored Division relied on them to do what no tank could: clear minefields, flush out anti-tank nests, and hold the ground the armor had just shattered. To achieve this, a motorized battalion bristled with an absurd amount of firepower, often carrying twice as many Bren light machine guns as their walking counterparts. Yet, their bravery was measured in millimeters. Wrapped in just 10 millimeters of steel and exposed to the sky, they rode into the teeth of 88-millimeter guns and mortar fire. They were the bridge to modern mobile warfare, a high-speed evolution that proved victory didn't just go to the strongest, but to the one who could keep up with the pace of the future. County and Coastal Defense Infantry. In the harrowing months following Dunkirk, Britain was a fortress under siege. While the world waited for the first German boot to hit British sand, a forgotten wall of men was erected along the tide line, the county divisions. These were the coastal defense infantry, a force born of absolute desperation and shrouded in a static destiny. Imagine an army of 10 divisions, roughly 100,000 men, assigned to hold the very ground under their boots, knowing that if the panzers landed, they would be the first, and perhaps the last, line of resistance. The reality of their service carries a chilling weight. These units were intentionally designed to be immobile. While the regulars scrambled for trucks, a county division was stripped of nearly all transport. In many battalions, mobility consisted of a handful of commandeered civilian delivery vans or even local bicycles. They were the tripwire. But their secret mission wasn't to win a grand war of maneuver, but to man the thousands of concrete pillboxes and barbed wire tangles that still scar the British coastline today. They were meant to fight to the last bullet in their isolated stop lines, serving as a human shield to buy mere hours for the mobile reserves to organize inland. By late 1941, as the threat of invasion faded, these ghost divisions vanished almost overnight, disbanded to fill the ranks of regiments heading for the desert. They remain a poignant chapter of the war, a temporary sacrificial shield that stood silent watch when Britain was at its most vulnerable. Airborne Infantry. Imagine the roar of a C-47 Dakota in the dead of night, the green light flickers, and you step into nothingness. This was the world of the Airborne Infantry, the Red Devils who rewrote the rules of engagement. Born from Winston Churchill's urgent demand for a force that could strike from the sky, these men were the ultimate elite, distinguished by the maroon beret that soon became a global symbol of cold-blooded courage. Unlike modern paratroopers, these men jumped with the X-type parachute, which had absolutely no steering capability. Once you left the plane, you were a passenger of fate, falling at 15 feet per second toward whatever lay below, be it a flooded marsh, a roof, or a German bayonet. To minimize their vulnerability in the air, they mastered an exit speed so intense that an entire stick of 10 men could vacate the aircraft in less than 10 seconds. During the North African campaign, it was the Germans themselves who coined the nickname Red Devils, a tribute to the sheer ferocity of these men who fought without heavy artillery or hope of immediate reinforcement. Whether it was the daring midnight seizure of Pegasus Bridge or the tragic heights of Arnhem, the airborne didn't just join the battle, they dropped directly into the heart of it, proving that the most dangerous place on a battlefield was anywhere the Red Devils decided to land. Airlanding Infantry. If the paratroopers were the scalpel, the airlanding infantry was the sledgehammer. While the world watched the skies for silk parachutes, the most vital heavy equipment of the British airborne divisions arrived via a much more precarious method, the airspeed Horsa glider. These men didn't jump, they sat strapped into wooden skeletons with canvas skins, towed by bombers before being released to glide silently into enemy territory. Once the tow rope was cut, there was no engine to go around for a second attempt. It was a one-way ticket. Even more startling, while paratroopers had their chutes, the soldiers inside the gliders were not issued parachutes. If the wings clipped a tree or a Rommel's asparagus, anti-glider stakes, ripped the fuselage, they went down with the ship. Yet this risk allowed for a massive tactical advantage. Unlike the paratroopers who often scattered for miles, a glider could deliver an entire 28-man platoon, fully armed and organized, onto a single postage stamp-sized landing zone. These silent heavyweights brought the muscle that paratroopers lacked. They carried 6-pounder anti-tank guns, jeeps, and even light tanks in the massive Hamilcar gliders. At the capture of Pegasus Bridge, it was the precision of these glider pilots, who landed within yards of their objective, that ensured victory before the Germans even heard a motor. They were the only soldiers in history who went to war in a vehicle made of plywood and glue, knowing that their first contact with the enemy would be a controlled crash. Commando Infantry. "I want a corps of hunters," Winston Churchill declared, demanding a force capable of unleashing a reign of terror across Nazi-occupied Europe. This mandate birthed the Commandos, the spiritual ancestors of modern special forces. Unlike regular units, every commando was a volunteer, hand-picked from across the entire British Army for their extreme physical and mental fortitude. Their forge was Achnacarry, Scotland, a training ground so brutal that soldiers navigated obstacle courses under live machine gun fire and slept on the frozen earth of the Highlands. It wasn't merely training, it was a transformation of the human spirit. The silhouette of a commando, the iconic green beret and the lethal needle-pointed Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife became the stuff of nightmares for German sentries. They pioneered butcher and bolt tactics, striking with surgical precision and vanishing before the enemy could even draw their breath. But perhaps the most chilling testament to their effectiveness was the Commando order issued by Adolf Hitler in 1942. The Führer was so unnerved by their hit-and-run raids that he ordered the summary execution of any captured commando, regardless of their uniform or status as prisoners of war, a direct violation of the Geneva Convention born of pure, unadulterated fear. Their crowning achievement was the Saint Nazaire raid, where they crippled the only dry dock capable of servicing German battleships. Of the 611 men involved, a staggering 5 Victoria Crosses were awarded for that single night, the highest concentration of Britain's top military honor in history. They proved that a few men, armed with audacity and a blade, could paralyze an empire. Royal Marines Commandos. If the Army Commandos were the hunters of the night, the Royal Marines Commandos were the masters of the shoreline, bridging the violent gap between the ocean and the land. For centuries, the Marines were the Admiralty's police, guarding warships and manning secondary guns. However, in 1942, the entire corps underwent a radical metamorphosis, transforming into specialized amphibious shock troops. They hold a unique distinction in British military history. The Royal Marines are the only service where every single member is a volunteer who must pass the legendary Commando course to earn the Green Beret. Their impact on D-Day was nothing short of staggering. On June 6, 1944, over 17,500 Royal Marines were deployed, the largest single-day mobilization in their centuries-old history. They were the Swiss Army knife of the invasion, not only piloting the landing craft through mine-choked surf, but also manning the specialized Centaur tanks that fired directly from the decks of landing ships to suppress beach defenses. A Royal Marine had to possess the endurance to survive hours of bone-jarring swells in a plywood LCA, only to leap into chest-deep water and charge fortified cliffs while still battling the debilitating effects of seasickness. By 1945, these rugged chameleons had fought from the frozen fjords of Norway to the suffocating jungles of Burma. They were the first-in, last-out specialists, a force that transformed the edge of the sea into a lethal gateway. They proved that as long as Britain ruled the waves, no coastline on earth was truly safe from the bite of the Green Beret. Gurkha Infantry. If a man says he is not afraid of dying, he is either lying or he is a Gurkha. This legendary quote from Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw perfectly introduces the Gurkha Infantry. These were not British subjects, but volunteers from the independent kingdom of Nepal, bound to the crown by a 19th-century treaty of friendship. During World War II, an incredible 250,000 Gurkhas descended from the Himalayas to serve across every major theater, from the sweltering jungles of Burma to the frozen peaks of Italy. The Gurkhas' ultimate psychological weapon wasn't a bullet, but the kukri, a heavy 18-inch curved blade. There is a persistent battlefield legend that once a kukri is unsheathed, it must taste blood before returning to its scabbard. Whether myth or reality, the fear it struck into the enemy was absolute. At the bloody siege of Monte Cassino, elite German paratroopers lived in terror of silent Gurkha night raids. Sentries would be found at dawn, perfectly still, neutralized so quietly that the man sleeping next to them never woke up. By the war's end, Gurkha units had been awarded a staggering 26 Victoria Crosses, Britain's highest military honor. They specialized in impossible terrain, thriving where tanks and trucks stalled. From the Hangman's Hill in Italy to the impenetrable Burmese bush, they proved that no environment was too hostile and no enemy too fearsome. They were the ultimate mountain warriors, fighting under a motto that still echoes today: better to die than be a coward. Reconnaissance Infantry. Before the tanks roared and the main infantry columns marched, there was a silent, lethal shadow dancing on the edge of the unknown: the Reconnaissance Infantry. Known as the Recce Corps, this specialized branch was formed in 1941 after the British realized that their divisions were moving blindly into German ambushes. Their mission was the loneliest and most nerve-wracking in the entire war: to find the enemy, provoke them into firing, and live long enough to report it. Operating in small, nimble sections, these men pushed miles ahead of the main front line. Their offices were often Humber light reconnaissance cars or Bren carriers, vehicles with armor so thin that even a heavy machine gun could pierce their hull like paper. Here is the startling reality of their existence. A recce section was essentially a miniature, self-contained army. Despite their small size, each group was bristling with its own wireless radios, anti-tank rifles, and Bren guns. They were the high-speed tripwires of the battlefield. In the dash across Europe in 1944, it was the Recce Corps that routinely arrived first in liberated towns, often being showered with flowers by locals hours before the main army appeared on the horizon. Yet, they lived on a knife's edge. If they made a mistake, they wouldn't just be outmatched. They would be obliterated before their radio call even reached headquarters. They were the ultimate gamblers, proving that in modern war, the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest gun. It's the man who sees you first. Thanks for watching. If this helped you see World War II differently, consider subscribing for more explained history.